Good evening and welcome to another program hosted by the Temple Beth Shalom of Florida Men's Club, one of our many, many programs that have kept our community together during these difficult times.
If Nate sounds remote, it is because he's calling us from Oakland, California, where he resides. However, he is a nationally syndicated writer. Very often his column is called Jewish Stars, although he writes elsewhere. And you may have seen his writing in the monthly Jewish Federation paper, among the many that he is a correspondent with. His syndicated column is from virtually almost every state in the Union. He's often cited by major publications and books for his research on Jewish celebrities and all kinds of, shall we say, areas of concern. And he has a good insight as to who's Jewish, who's not, and how. So here's Nate.
Hi, my name is Nate Bloom. As the Rabbi just said, I write for a number of Jewish papers, Jews in popular culture and about Jews.
Nate, can you make it louder?
A little louder.
Make it closer to your phone. Get closer. There you go.
Better. Try it again.
Okay. You'll have to cut me some slack as I deliver this lecture. I've been interviewed twice over the years by regular media reporters, and all I had to do was answer their questions. This is my first lecture. A few months ago, a longtime email friend who teaches a course on Jews and popular culture asked to be interviewed for his class. Of course, it was a Zoom interview, and the most surprising part is that my friend teaches at the University of Kansas. Kansas is not thought of as a Jewish hotbed. The class had about 25 students. The professor told me about half of the students are Jewish. Because of my Jewish fact-filled brain, I didn't really have to struggle to make the interview a bit Kansas kosher-centric. I mentioned that Jewish actor Paul Rudd, who starred in the newest Ghostbuster film, many other hit films, grew up in Kansas, not far from Kansas City, Missouri. Rudd had his bar mitzvah in Kansas. And not long after the class was held, he was named the sexiest man alive by People magazine. His wife, who was Jewish, was very kind in her comments about her husband's title. I also told the class that three Jews rode with abolitionist John Brown as he fought pro-slavery forces in Kansas in the 1850s. One of the three Jews, a guy named Theodore Weiner, is even mentioned and called Jewish in a miniseries about John Brown called Good Lord Bird. Good Lord Bird began streaming last year on Showtime. Pretty good series, and Ethan Hawke, who isn't Jewish, stars as Brown. But one of the most interesting things to me was that David Diggs, an African-American Jew, played Frederick Douglass in the series. Douglass, of course, was a famous African-American author and political figure. Diggs is most famous for his Tony-winning performance in the original Broadway production of Hamilton and the TV film version of the film of Hamilton. His father is African-American and not Jewish. His mother is white, and Diggs is identified as Jewish. Last year, Diggs created a Hanukkah video for the Disney Channel. It featured apparently interracial Jewish kids mouthing the words of a Hanukkah song that Diggs wrote himself. He was actually doing the singing.
Nate, I have a suggestion. Nate, if you could speak louder and slower, we'll hear better, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Diggs's Hanukkah video may be the best Hanukkah video I've ever seen. By the way, 5 Jews of color were nominated for an Emmy this past year. Diggs was one. The others are Maya Rudolph, who you probably know from SNL, British actress named Sophie Okonedo, Tracy Ellis, who was on Blackish, and Journey Smollett. If you can hit Google for credits. Like Diggs, they all have a black non-Jewish parent and a white Jewish parent. Like all Jews, they vary in their connection to Judaism and Jewish identity. None practice another faith. Of course, these 5 actors, in some sense, represent a larger change in the makeup of the Jewish community. But that's a huge topic that I won't try and tackle here. I know knowing all this stuff is a little weird, but that is who I am, and knowing all this stuff is invaluable in doing my column. I wasn't great at Hebrew language studies, but I was interested in the history part of the curriculum and easily got A's. From a very young age, I was very interested in history. I have a degree in American history, did some grad work in the same subject, and I have a law degree. I'm a retired attorney. Um, I went from running a Jewish biographical site and then was asked by an editor to do a column for their Jewish paper about celebrities. And not that long after, I left the website. Moving right along. So you may ask, who do you consider Jewish? Well, I developed guidelines over several years. I think they are rational. Of course, they don't have the force of law. I'm not a grand rabbi. It is a standard or a guidepost for a column, not the world. I count or designate as Jewish anyone with at least one Jewish parent who is raised Jewish or secular and doesn't identify with a faith other than Judaism as an adult. I include converts to Judaism, no matter what wing of Judaism oversaw the conversion. Of course, the halakhic or Orthodox rule is that a Jew is someone with a Jewish mother. However, I don't recognize as Jewish in my columns persons with a Jewish mother who raised Christian or Muslim or any other religion besides Judaism you care to name. The first time I discuss a celebrity, I lay out their Jewish parentage and readers can decide if they're Jewish. They can make by their lights. Many times I repeat this info in later columns. Any regular reader of my column knows that celebrities like Michael Douglas, Andrew Garfield, and David Duchovny are the sons of Jewish fathers and non-Jewish mothers. If my readers are Orthodox, they won't consider these three men Jewish. That's your choice. Like I said, I am just writing a column. I don't identify as Jewish celebrities with just one Jewish parent. I do sometimes mention, because I get a lot of reader questions about this, about the parenthood or whatever, the background of an actor with a Jewish sounding name. So when they appear in a film or TV show I'm writing about anyway, I'll touch on their background. Well-known actors Elmer Hirsch and Zac Efron fit into this category. They had one Jewish grandparent, their father's father, and many Jews assume they are Jewish. They are not. It's very, very rare to find someone with just one Jewish grandparent who identifies as Jewish. Well, let's move on to something else. I often get asked why Jews are interested in who is Jewish. In my experience, it varies based on what field the Jewish celebrity achieved fame in. Interest varies in the field of the celebrity. When it comes to the military heroes, for example, Jews want to know who is Jewish for reasons very different from why they were interested in learning what Oscar winners are Jewish. My favorite Jewish story of the past month involves a military man. Ed Shames, a Jew, died on December 4th, age 99. He was the last surviving officer of Easy Company. Easy Company inspired a book called Band of Brothers and the hit HBO miniseries of the same name. Easy Company was a real elite World War II paratrooper unit. The series focused on 15 members of Easy Company, 2 of whom were identified as Jewish. However, all 162 members of the company, including Ed Shames, appeared in the series, usually for just a minute or so. Of course, Shames was played by an actor. I'm going to cut a little bit ahead. He did all the other things like D-Day that the other guys did. His last combat mission was was being at the raid or taking of Hitler's famous Alpine home called the Eagle's Nest. James his name is spelled Shames. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, as you can see. His obituary says, when Germany surrendered, Ed and his men of easy company entered Hitler's Eagle's Nest, where Ed managed to acquire a few bottles of cognac. These bottles of cognac had a label on them indicating they were for the Fuhrer's use only. Later, Ed would use the cognac to toast his oldest son's bar mitzvah. You have to smile when you imagine that this Jewish war veteran has actually captured Hitler's brandy and is toasting his bar mitzvah boy with Hitler's cognac. I've found that most Jews like stories about Jews in the military because fighting Jews with guns, in other words, Jews in the military, confounds the stereotype of ghetto Jews who would take on the war with their wits, but not with their fists. I could go on, but let's just let me say that with all sorts of fields, once you get into a name of individual person and really look into your background, you pick up all sorts of Jewish and American history. That's about the best thing about being a celebrity hunter. As with most fields, when you look at Jews in the military, the facts confound the stereotype. There are more than a few Jews in the military. Like most good stories, good military stories, they appeal to a much bigger public when they're tied in with a showbiz connection. I talked about the Jewish guy before with John Brown. Ed Shames is in the Band of Brothers. And there's buzz that a movie might be made about the life of Ben Sullivan, an Army dentist who was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 2002 for his heroism. It's an amazing story. Please Google him. I always think of and research the connections between Jews in different fields and different countries. If you do that, you have context and learn a lot, not just an isolated fact like somebody famous is Jewish. Paul Rudd, Daveed Diggs, Zoe Kravitz, Scarlett Johansson, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Timothy Chalamet are all famous Jewish actors, but they have quite varying roots. And when you acquaint yourself with these roots, you really have a window into many aspects of the Jewish experience. Sometimes you might learn more if you look into the background of a lesser character actor. I was thinking of Brian George, one of my favorites. Who's Brian George? He's the guy who played the memorable character Babu Bat, a Pakistani immigrant on Seinfeld, and played Raj's father on The Big Bang Theory. He was born in Israel, parents who came from India. His parents' ancestry, like many Indian Jews, goes back to Iraq. This is what I mean about a celebrity's life being a window to other things. Other things like knowing the fact that India had a Jewish community for close to 2,000 years, or has had one. I've long recognized that what I do is part of a sort of a game. I've given it a name to it. I called it Locate the Landsman, or LTL for short. Landsman, if you didn't know, it means countryman in Yiddish. It was often used in prior generations to refer to another Jew, no matter where he came from. A lot of Jews fell when a Jew does something good, like a Jewish pitcher who wins the final game of the World Series. That happened this past year. Or winning a Nobel Prize, as two Jews did a few months ago. To a large extent, I recognize that I'm the guy who gives people who play LTL, looking for the landsman, looking for the Jew, I give them their fix, their dose. They just love it. They shine with pride because the landsman did a good thing, won an Oscar, developed a vaccine, won a World Series game. And of course, they know that they learn about all these wonderful Jews in my column. And I really think there is nothing wrong with this type of quelling or vicarious gratification. As I say later in this maybe too long thing, this type of quelling can actually aid the survival of the Jewish people. I don't mention many bad Jews in my column, but it happens now and again. Harvey Weinstein being a prime example of a bad Jew I had to mention a few times. But I've provided my readers with some good news related to the Weinstein scandals. I wrote that Gwyneth Paltrow, whose father is Jewish and identifies as Jewish, took a courageous stand. She was one of the first persons to agree to speak to the New York Times reporters who broke the Weinstein story. She told them how Weinstein harassed her. And Paltrow did more. She called a lot of other actresses and urged them to share their Weinstein horror story with the Times reporters. She did this knowing Weinstein could hamper her future acting career. The Weinstein story was broke by New York Times reporter Megan Towie and Jodi Kantor. They got a Pulitzer Prize for their work. I made sure this following Kantor quote was in my column. In 2017, Kantor was interviewed about why she did this reporting. She said, "I grew up around people with numbers on their arms. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. It led me to think about the big questions we often ask in investigative journalism. How could something like this have gone on? What allowed this to happen?" This statement, frankly, made me quell with pride. And in a weird way, it sort of eased my annoyance of being related in some very small way to a monster like Harvey Weinstein. Moving on to another field, Jews, especially Jewish guys, are usually very interested in who is Jewish in pro sports. A Jewish professional ball player blunts the stereotype that Jews are not good in sports. Put bluntly, this stereotype is stupid. As a percentage of the American population, the Jewish representation in pro baseball is just about on the mark, equal to the Jewish percentage of the population. And a lot more Jews are in pro ball than a lot of other ethnic groups that are similar to Jews, like Japanese Americans, in terms of their income, in terms of their education. There's a lot more Jews than a lot of other groups that are roughly equivalent to them in professional baseball. But, I know what's really going on. I believe that Jews think that because they are in the top of their fields in so many things, they should be overrepresented in athletics too. The world just doesn't work that way. In my column, I do list all the Jews in Major League Baseball at the start of the season. Likewise, football, always about a half a dozen Jewish players in the NFL. And most of the time, hockey, NHL hockey, always again about 5 to 10 Jews. I don't have to do the research on this as I do in other fields because there's a remarkable publication called the Jewish Sports Review. It's a print-only publication that runs down all the Jews in sport from high school to the pros. It's run by 2 retired guys who are friends of mine. And they are amazingly dogged in running who is Jewish in athletics. We share info and I always credit them. And in the last World Series, there was something to cavil about. Houston played Atlanta and 4 Jewish players appeared. Atlanta had a pitcher, Match Fried, a guy raised in a religious Jewish home who won the final World Series game. And his teammate is Jock Peterson, an outfielder who's always been secular. His mother is Jewish, but he did play for Israel in an international baseball competition. Houston had a Garrett Stubbs, the so-so catcher. His mother is Jewish, and Alex Bregman, an all-star shortstop who had his bar mitzvah at New Mexico's oldest synagogue. That synagogue is actually the same shul that the family of Alexei Ash, the lawyer wife of Seth Meyers, goes to. Meyers is like Zac Efron. His paternal grandfather was his only Jewish grand, and he says he isn't Jewish himself. But he's made it pretty clear his kids are being raised Jewish. As I often say, every Jewish celebrity is somehow connected to another one. Alex Bregman to, well, not quite Jewish Seth Meyers, but you get the point. The Winter Olympics begin in a few weeks. So I have to mention that Jews have won way more Olympic medals, winter and summer, than they should have got, again, based on a percentage of the world or American population. Jews have particularly excelled in swimming and fencing. 32 Jews have won at least one Olympic medal in swimming. Perhaps swimming is in the Jewish DNA. The Talmud says a father has to teach his children two things: how to make a living and how to swim. Over 50 Jews who won a medal in fencing, including Nick Itkin, won a bronze in the last Olympics. How did this all start? Well, in the 19th century, Jews were insulted when they went to European universities. The standard thing to do when you were insulted was to challenge the guy to a fencing match. So Jews figured this all out. They took fencing lessons, and they got so good that the anti-Semites wouldn't fence with them anymore, but a fencing tradition among Jews was established. In the last Olympics, 22 Jews from the diaspora appeared at the games, and 8 Jews won medals, which is a lot bigger amount than a lot of whole countries. It's tough to research to find all the diaspora Jews at the games, and most of the Jewish media, frankly, didn't do a very good job. But again, my friends at Jewish Sports Review found the information and were kind enough to share it with me. There will be some Jews at the Beijing Games in a few weeks, but finding out who they are is hard. Back in 2002, I had a big quelling moment during the Winter Olympics. I researched the athletes and shared my info with Jewish Sports Review, and together we knew that 3 out of the 4 contenders for the individual women's figure skating competition had a Jewish background. The women's figure skating final is the most viewed game of every Winter Games event. Millions, hundreds of millions of people tune in from all over the world. And as I told friends, I said, what are the odds? 3 out of 4 have a Jewish background. There's a tiny Jewish population worldwide, but still these Jewish women excel. The gold medal went to Sarah Hughes, whose mother is Jewish. She was raised Jewish and wore a Star of David while skating. The bronze went to Irina Slutskaya, a Russian whose father is Jewish. American Jew Sasha Cohen finished 4th. It was just really great to know their Jewish background as the competition was happening. That's one of the things I think people get out of my column. I have a talent, I know how to use the internet, I know how to use Ancestry.com, of introducing new Jewish celebrities to my readers, actors at the beginning of their career. This is something most other Jewish papers don't do. They just pick up items about established Jewish stars and republish them. People really like knowing that somebody's Jewish when they're watching a movie, and even more so when they're watching a sporting event. And the better you can be on that, the more your work is appreciated by your audience. Even Sasha Cohen, going back to this connection thing, has a big time celebrity connection. She's the sister-in-law of Jewish actress Julianne Margulies, the star of ER and The Good Wife. They married 2 Jewish brothers. Well, not at the same time, but each one is married to a brother, a set of brothers, both of whom are Jewish lawyers, by the way. Okay, I think much more than in the past, because of the pandemic, my mind has gone, and some of my journalism has gone to science in the last year and a half. And that was pushed along by the very fact that not much new TV or movies were coming out until quite recently. So I went into the land of stats pretty recently, and I was surprised to find an interesting coincidence. The number of Jews who ever played Major League Baseball, that's 173 guys, is about equal to the number of Jews who have won the Nobel Prize, 194. About 1% of all the guys who ever played in the majors were Jewish, but a little more than 20% of all the Nobel Prize winners are Jewish. I mean, you look at this, the stats in just two fields. In physics, 26% of all the physics Nobel awarded were awarded to Jews, and 38% of the physics Nobels were won by Americans. Jews who won 26% of all the Nobels awarded in medicine, and 38% of all the Nobels given to Americans. It's these hard statistics more than anything that has made academics and others look up and say, how can this be? How is it possible that Jews, less than 0.2% of the world, have won so many Nobels? Academics don't have a good answer. The number is so high that citing Jewish love of learning doesn't seem to be a sufficient explanation. I do think that the Jewish Historical Society should put out a series of cards featuring Jewish Nobel Prize winners, as they really did with Jewish major leaguers. There's really a card set you can buy, baseball cards from the Jewish Historical Society of all the guys who ever played, Jewish guys who ever played in the majors. I think they should send free card sets out to Hebrew schools. Pretty soon, Jewish kids, these science cards, pretty soon Jewish kids will stop fetching about why there aren't more Jewish baseball players and get into Jewish science heroes. Of course, I'm kidding, but I would really like to see kids trading Einstein cards. Sure, the knowledge of who's famous in science, among famous and Jewish and science among Jews will never reach the levels as it does for professional athletes. But every Jew should at least know that 20 Nobel Prize 20% stat. That 20% of the Nobel Prizes have been won by Jews, and that represents so many things that have helped humanity. And if they know that much, then they can realize how lucky they are to be a member of an amazing people. Here's another amazing science-related fact. Jews have had a prominent role in developing all three of the major COVID-19 vaccines. I researched the backgrounds of the leading scientists, and I reported that in my column. That was a departure from things, for the most part, I've done before, but it was the issue of the day and something people were and are interested in. Here's the four guys that I found, and I won't say that much about them, but here it goes. Dr. Tal Zaks, 54, and is an Israeli-born and trained oncologist who has been the chief medical officer for Moderna since 2015. He's the point guy on Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. Pfizer's chief scientist is Dr. Michael Dolston. Like Zaks, he's an immigrant to the United States. He was born and raised in Sweden. He and his Swedish Jewish wife are now American citizens. Pfizer's CEO, Dr. Albert Bourla, is a Greek, a Sephardic Jew, born and raised in Greece. He was trained as a veterinarian and worked up the Pfizer corporate medical ladder. Most Greek Jews were killed in the Holocaust, and there are only about 5,000 in Greece today. Dr. Dan Baruch is the key doctor of the J&J vaccine. He runs the Center for Virology and Vaccine Research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. His father is Jewish and his mother is a Chinese immigrant to America. I don't know much about Dr. Baruch's religious upbringing, but I do know his sister, also a doctor, belongs to a Reconstructionist synagogue and sits on its board. The prominence of Jews in COVID-19 research floored me, and it's the knowledge of that is, the fact of it is almost as astonishing as the Nobel Prize statistics I just talked about. But I have to stop with the science and tell you to go to your TV on December 22nd and watch the Kennedy Center's Honor Gala concert on CBS at 9 p.m. Bette Midler and Lorne Michaels are two of the 5 honorees for Lifetime Achievement. Trust me on this. CBS, for whatever perverse reason, never re-shows the gala concert. So watch it live and DVR it if you can. 3 old pals of Midler took the stage. The event was actually held on December 5th. Took the stage to say nice things about Midler. Her old friends are Jewish actress Goldie Hawn, singer Melissa Manchester, who is Jewish, and Barbara Hershey, who co-starred with Midler in the hit film Beaches. Hershey's father was Jewish. She was born Barbara Herstein. Lorne Michaels is the co-creator of Saturday Night Live and its main producer for a remarkable 45 years. He was born Lorne Lipowitz in Canada. You can criticize some of the cast choices and guest host choices that Michaels has made, but it's incredible that anyone could keep a hit show as a hit show for 45 years. I'm sorry that I'm not going to get into politics as advertised. I don't do many political items in the off year. I know every Jew who's in the Senate, and I know the Jewish background of some of Joe Biden's relatives, but that's for next year. I can tell you that Bette Midler is a rare Jewish native of Hawaii. One of Hawaii's U.S. senators is Brian Schatz. Also Jewish is Josh Green, the state's lieutenant governor. He was an emergency doctor with decades of experience, and the governor put Green in charge of the state's COVID reaction. He must have done well. His poll ratings are very high. Of course, there's always a downside, as we all know, to being a COVID doctor. Green's house, condo, was picketed by anti-vaxxers, and anti-Semitic leaflets were sprinkled around. But Hawaii is Hawaii, and you know that these people are truly a fringe in a state like Hawaii. And meanwhile, it looks like Green is likely to be the next governor of Hawaii the moment the present governor decides not to run anymore. Final word in this, and I hope to take a lot of good questions. There is value, I think, in identifying Jewish celebrities for a Jewish audience. I'm not saying that an actress is as important as a Nobel Prize winners, but Nobel Prize winners and Jewish actors are usually good role models for young people, especially people in popular culture. They appeal to younger people, and they sometimes make it cool to be Jewish. And when you take in the spectrum of Jewish accomplishment, from baseball to Broadway, from vaccines to the Olympics, you have to realize that Jewish culture or civilization is an engine. It's an engine that produces accomplished people in numbers that are astonishing. It is a culture and a civilization that is worth preserving and passing on. That's where I was going to end. But recently, an Armenian friend asked me why there wasn't so much stuff about Armenians and so on. I said, I don't know, no disrespect, but I don't think Armenians have enough celebrities to sustain a weekly column about Armenian celebrities in the news. I never have that problem. There's always a Jew doing something pretty cool or noteworthy. And that's pretty amazing for, well, not that many million people. That's it. Does anyone have a question?
Yes, we have a question. We have a question, Nate. First off, thank you very, very much for that. That was very interesting. I covered a wide variety of topics and people. We have about 20 minutes to go. I do have a question from the chat. I think it's a very good question. It said, there's a movement now to only have actors of the ethnic group that is being portrayed be of that ethnic group. What is your opinion of this movement?
Well, I cut out some stuff that I was going to say about that very issue because it is amazingly complex. obviously, Jewish actors would be virtually unemployed if they only could play Jewish parts. And that has a twist on it. But how far do you want to go? I mean, people have already raised this. Is it the wrong Hispanic? Can a Colombian play a Puerto Rican? And so on. It gets absurd. And also it backtracks against, or it can hit Black actors in the back because a lot of things now are being cast colorblind, which, in other words, you have Black people as knights in the Middle Ages, which is historically not correct, but it's a way to open it up. Shakespeare is so classic, people accept that a Black actor can play it. The big problem, which is related to this, is that Jewish actors and actresses are right in complaining that too often there aren't enough explicitly Jewish roles, and those are often not given to non-Jews. The interesting thing is that Jews have a hand in many cases in disguising that the character is Jewish. It's never made explicit. They seem Jewish. And so there really aren't that many explicitly Jewish big parts out there. Think about it. How many explicitly Jewish characters on TV? I don't mean seem Jewish, but are Jewish. Can you think of? There really aren't nearly as many as you would think. And so Jewish actors do have a correct gripe when they say, we're not getting the Jewish parts. They don't say there aren't that many of them. There are in very small movies or off-Broadway plays. I'm talking about the big roles. And they do have a point. They do have a gripe. And one thing that's been going on for decades is that a character will be Jewish in print, if it's a novel, and when the novel or whatever, or even comic book is translated into film or TV, the Jewish background is erased. This goes on constantly. They just, for marketing reasons mostly, I think, but for reasons that are hard to pull out, time after time after time, Jewish characters, Jewish identity is erased when they get to the big screen or the TV screen. So given that, Jewish actors can have a right to fetch when a plumb Jewish role is going to a non-Jew. Now, the flip side is the Jews would be out of work if they couldn't play non-Jews. White ones, perhaps, or if they're, whatever, it doesn't matter. But there is a genuine grievance here. The term used is Jew face, which comes from Asian face, which was when Asians were played by non-Asian actors. In London last year, they did a American Jewish play with all Jewish parts, as they were written, with not a single Jew in the cast. And British Jews complained that this was Jew face, putting non-Jews in every single role. And Sarah Silverman was recently made the same complaint, that all the good Jewish roles go to non-Jewish actresses. And she has a point. I'll stop there.
All right, I'm going to ask Cantor Simon. He's been patiently waiting with his hand raised right over his picture.
Okay.
And then after that, we'll get to Rabbi Ed to read his question. So Cantor Simon, please unmute, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very interesting program. Thank you so much. First of all, when you mentioned about the COVID, did you mention Rochelle Walinski, the director of the CDC? She is Jewish. We see her just about every evening on the news. And
Well,
she lives in New
I did mention him and many others in my column but I was focusing this particular one on people who actually were very close to the development of vaccines themselves. And
Okay,
she was,
yeah,
overseeing them.
she is the face of the Center for Communicable Disease. She is Jewish. She lives in Newton, Massachusetts, where I used to live, and she and her family belongs to Temple Emmanuel. So they are very Jewish, and we see her almost every night on the evening news. The other thing I wanted to mention was Seth Meyers, because one of my closest friends is a rabbi in Albuquerque, and he officiated at the wedding ceremony of Seth Meyers on Martha's Vineyard. And he told me all about it. And the only reason he would accept to the invitation, because her family, the bride's family, grew up in that congregation in Albuquerque. The only reason he accepted to officiate was that he asked that the couple promise to bring their children up Jewish, which you mentioned that they are doing. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, actually, years ago, before I think he married his wife, Alexei Ash, I saw a profile of Alexei's father in a food magazine of all things. He was talking about cooking Jewish, and he's a convert to Judaism. And he said that he's been Jewish for so long. I consider this is my home cooking. It was very charming. Lexi's mother, I understand, is the daughter or granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. Here's a sideline. Only, I think, twice in all the years I've been doing this, have I gotten a call from an agent for an actor telling me I had gotten something wrong. And one of them was Seth Meyers. Now, this goes back like 10, 12 years ago. It was before I could really, it was much less biographical information out on him. And his brother, who was also a comedian, as you probably know, made a statement that, while a little bit ambiguous, anybody would take that he was saying that he was Jewish, and therefore his brother would be Jewish too. Anyway, the agent contacted me and said, Seth Meyers is not Jewish. Please correct your copy. That was it. Fine. And then I found out that from another columnist that the exact weird thing happened. And so, in a weird way, it was very nice that things turned out this way. I don't think he was, ashamed of having a Jewish grandparent or anything, or his Asian, I'm working on his behalf. I just think that he told them to correct the record, and they did. Sometimes I think, I shouldn't really think this way, but sometimes I think with Seth Meyers, it's sort of like we're getting one back, I mean, he's so immersed himself in a sort of a Jewish world. Last night, he had David Baddiel, that's how his name's pronounced, a British Jewish comedian on. And he was on to promote his new book, which is called The Jews Don't Count. And it's about how Jews are seen as white privileged people, and people don't take seriously anti-Semitism as a form of racism that so many other groups, when something happens to them, everybody says, oh, that's racist. Now, the very fact that Seth Meyers had him on to discuss a heavy book, and they only discussed the book for about 5 seconds. No, that's not true, about 2 minutes. Most of the interview was on much lighter stuff. The very fact that he had him on was, I think, a sign that Seth Meyers sees himself in some way part of the Jewish community. That's all. Next question.
Thank you. Rabbi Ed, would you unmute yourself, please, and ask your question? Because I think it's a very interesting question.
So I want to ask you, Nate.
Yes.
And this is a two-part question. Is Gal Gadot, who was Wonder Woman in the featured films, is she a reflection, the character, a reflection of Jewish views of the Messiah, female style? Which by that I mean, is she Yeah, Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress who was in Wonder Woman.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And is she like basically like portraying a Jewish savior? I say this before Christmas, mind you, but simply wonder about that connection, the Jewish connection with her portrayal of Wonder Woman.
Well, Wonder Woman was actually one of the very few major comic heroes who was not created by a Jew. I mean, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. So, and you can go on and on. But with the Jewish contribution to superheroes and comic books, Jews are real good at making up mythological stories for the world around. But, okay, I'm not sure. Is she you're saying that she's a messianic figure of some sort?
The portrayal of Wonder Woman as a savior for the world, for the good side of, appealing to the good side of people and wiping out evil, strikes me as messianic. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of what most superheroes do, or seem to do?
The majority, yeah.
It always seemed to me that Superman was about as Jewish as they got, in that his last name is El, in Jewish variation of the name of God. He was born he was a refugee from another planet. He hid his fierceness behind a mild appearance. And he came as a savior of the world in many, many ways. And in some ways, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is another messianic figure, but he was created by a Jew. The song was written by a Jew. So there you go. There's another Jewish messianic figure out there, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. All right. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have a
second one. Yes, Rabbi, please.
A related question. Which actors have been social activists in the past years in any prominent kind of way?
Well, and I know you're speaking of Jewish actors. You want me to speak to Jewish actresses?
Yeah, I'm wondering about Jewish actors. Paul Newman wasn't Jewish. He was an activist, right?
Paul Newman?
Yeah, was he Jewish? No.
His father was Jewish. His mother was not Jewish. His mother tried to get him to be a Christian Science believer like herself. He resisted religion his whole life. I think he was one of the guys who was quoted saying, "I've been worked on by experts." However, he did star in Exodus, right? Remember that movie? As the Jewish hero, Ari Ben Canaan. And he was seen at Haganah veteran functions for years afterwards. So, he was what he was. I think what's his name? Adam Sandler, in one of his Hanukkah songs, had Paul Newman is half Jewish and Goldie Hawn is half Jewish. You put them together, you get one good-looking Jew. And on that one, he did make a mistake. He did make a number of mistakes in the song, but that was correct. Goldie Hawn, on the other hand, was raised Jewish by a Jewish mother, and her two children, or actually she's three, but her three children who have only one Jewish grandparent are the only. Two of them are actors. One is Kate Hudson, and the other one is Wyatt Russell. They're half siblings to each other. They're the only people with one Jewish grandparent. They are also halakhic Jews because they're straight female line, who were raised with some Jewish religious background and, when asked, identify as Jewish. So they're the exception. I've never found anybody else who like those two siblings. It's kind of cool. Interestingly enough, Wyatt Russell was tried to become a pro hockey guy before he went into acting. And it was my friends at this Jewish Sports Review who contacted him and said, "You consider yourself Jewish?" And he said, "Yeah, definitely." So I found out about him in a backdoor way many years ago. Does anybody else have a question?
I don't
could
see
write
any
these
other
on that
questions,
stuff.
Nate. Let me just scan the other line. I don't see anybody's hand raised. I don't see anybody with anything else going on. So I'm going to thank you on my end, and I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Ed to thank you from his end.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Nate, I want to commend you on both your depth and breadth, and I know you had a lot more unsaid than said, of course, in this narrow scope. I urge people to read Nate's columns in the Jewish Federation News, which I think is available to everybody without charge per se. So you'll enjoy what he has to say because he has a whole arsenal of additional interesting facts about being Jewish. And I want to tell you personally, I enjoyed your assessment that these particular, shall we say, people in different fields who are Jewish and excel in their fields do us proud. And I think it's important for both the older and younger generation to take that in as such.
So with that, I want to thank everybody for their attendance and thank Mr. Bloom. Ladies and gentlemen, so that concludes tonight's program. Thank you very much for your attention. And schlaf gesund, I guess is what they say, right? So we'll be all set. Okay.